Whether it's someone claiming supernatural powers, or writing science fiction, or merely just speculating, people have been trying to predict the future since the dawn of time. We do it today. If you Google predictions for 2100, you'll be greeted with thousands of pages, with stunning predictions for technology and horrifying predictions for the state of the world. Predictions, however, are rarely accurate. We looked at some Victorian predictions from 1899 for the year 2000 just a few weeks ago. I'm going to play that at the end of this video just in case you missed it. It's wonderful. Most of the predictions are way off the mark. Some are quite accurate though. Sometimes, however, either by a stroke of genius or by pure luck, predictions made decades ago or even centuries ago turn out to be incredibly accurate. Predictions so accurate, made so long ago, really do defy belief. I've compiled what I believe to be the 10 most scarily accurate predictions ever made. This top 10 list is in no particular order. Each one is as incredible as the next. So for now, please sit back and watch these 10 predictions made by figures in the past that correctly predicted the future. In 1865, French novelist Jules Verne published a book called From the Earth to the Moon. It was a story about man's first attempt to go to the moon, and he included in the story some incredibly accurate prophecies. And remember, these predictions were made 104 years before the actual moon landing. His description of the rocket is accurate, correctly anticipating 3 propulsion stages and the need for a separate spaceship. He correctly predicted the rocket structure. He called the rocket a gun and the spaceship a bullet. He predicted that the United States would be the first to get there, to the surface of the moon. Who else was thinking that in 1865? In his book, there were 3 crew members fired at the moon from his rocket. The exact number of inhabitants from the Apollo 11 spacecraft in 1969. He predicted that Florida and Texas would compete for the launch rights. And that actually happened. In the end, Florida won the right to launch and Texas won the right to host the mission control. Houston in Texas was the first word officially broadcast from the moon. Houston, Tranquility Base here. He called the spacecraft Columbiad. The actual name for the spacecraft in 1969 was called Columbia. Jules Verne also included a splashdown into the sea for the spacecraft, aided by parachutes. And that is, of course, exactly what happened. Jules Verne said the cost of the space program that no one else was thinking about and that he had completely made up, allowing for inflation and conversion, would be $12.1 billion US. The actual cost of the US space program was $14.4 billion US. He was just 10% out. Almost 40 years before the first flight by Orville and Wilbur Wright in 1903, Jules Verne could see and imagine the moon landing in incredible and staggering detail, long before anyone was even considering it, and 104 years before it actually happened. In 1898, Morgan Robertson wrote a novella called Futility. Unlike a lot of predictions on this list, nobody's suggesting that Robertson sat down aiming to predict the future, but somehow that's exactly what he did. By 1912, people of the day assumed that Morgan Robertson was bestowed with superhuman powers of foresight because of startling similarities between his book and the heartbreaking loss of the Titanic. For in his 1898 book, he writes of an ocean liner called the Titan. The Titan was the largest ocean liner in the world. The Titanic was the largest ocean liner in the world. In Robertson's book, Titan was described as unsinkable. 14 years later, Titanic was described as unsinkable. Robertson said that Titan was huge, over 800 feet long. The Titanic, 14 years later, was 882 feet long. In his 1898 book, Titan sets out on a transatlantic trip to New York, just like the Titanic. Titan then hits an iceberg midway across the Atlantic. In fact, Robertson makes it clear that the Titan didn't actually just hit the iceberg, it sideswipes the iceberg and it opens its hull. Robertson says in his book that if the Titan had hit the iceberg head on, it would have been okay. 14 years later, Titanic sideswiped an iceberg, opening up 5 watertight compartments in its hull. It would later be proved that Titanic would have survived a head-on crash, just as Robertson had prophesied. The 1898 fictional liner, the Titan, sinks with the loss of over half of its passengers. It wasn't carrying enough lifeboats, just like the Titanic. Robertson had seemingly predicted in incredible detail the loss of the Titanic. The book was re-released in 1912 and retitled The Wreck of the Titan. I presume to cash in on its notoriety. Halley's Comet is the only naked-eye comet that can appear twice in a human lifetime. I was lucky enough to see Halley's Comet in 1986. It appears in the sky for weeks, seemingly motionless, stuck in mid-air. Look out for it when it next comes in 2061. If I'm very lucky, I might see it too. One appearance of the comet was in 1835, which coincided with the birth of Samuel Langhorne Clemens, better known as the author Mark Twain. Mark Twain was aware that his birth coincided with the arrival of the comet, and he was quoted as saying, "The Almighty has no doubt said, now here are these 2 unaccountable freaks. They came in together, they must go out together." In a 1909 biography by Albert Payne, Mark Twain was also quoted as saying, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It's coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet." On the 20th of April 1910, Halley's Comet made its scheduled reappearance. On the 21st of April 1910, one day later, Mark Twain died of a massive heart attack. He correctly and accurately predicted his own death to within 24 hours. In 1900, John Elfreth Watkins wrote an article for the Ladies' Home Journal entitled "What May Happen in the Next 100 Years." Watkins was an American civil engineer and was merely responding to the age-old need of the press to make predictions at certain key times. In this case, the turn of the 20th century. Readers expect that. Watkins was also a writer for a sister publication to the Ladies' Home Journal. He made a host of predictions in his very well thought-out article, including almost getting the population of the United States right for the year 2000, and predicting the rise of ready-cooked meals, and even very accurately predicted a 2-inch height increase over 100 years for the average American man. 3 of his predictions were particularly stunning though. He predicted satellite television in 1900. Man will see around the world. Persons and things of all kinds will be brought within focus of cameras connected electrically, with screens at opposite ends of circuits, thousands of miles at a span. He predicted that one day, colour photographs could be transmitted instantly around the world. Photographs will be telegraphed from any distance. If there be a battle in China 100 years hence, snapshots of its most striking events will be published in the newspaper an hour later. Photographs will reproduce all of nature's colours. He predicted mobile phones and international telephony. Wireless telephone and telegraph circuits will span the world. A husband in the middle of the Atlantic will be able to converse with his wife sitting in her boudoir in Chicago. We will be able to telephone to China quite as readily as we now talk from New York to Brooklyn. He didn't get everything right though. He also predicted that there'd be no C, X or Q in the alphabet by the year 2000. I've just checked and they're still there. But there's no denying that the majority of his predictions were absolutely accurate. They were made 125 years ago in a little-known journal, and they seal John Watkins' place in history as a major thinker and futurist of his day. predictions made in 1899 that I'm going to show you at the end of this video clearly demonstrated that no one at that time was thinking about mobile phones and the internet. They saw the future to be largely mechanical with futuristic twists. But Nikola Tesla clearly wasn't thinking like that. Tesla's name lives on, of course, thanks to Tesla Motors. Not only was he an inventor and a scientist, he was also a skilled futurist. In 1909, he gave an interview with the New York Times. 1909! Remember that date while I read this quote to you. Here's what he said, a quote widely accepted to predict mobile phones. "It will soon be possible to transmit wireless messages all over the world so simply that any individual can own and operate his own apparatus." In 2010, Elon Musk famously described the internet, as he saw it being built in the 90s, as humanity acquiring a nervous system. 100 years ago, Tesla said, "When wireless technology is perfectly applied, the whole Earth will be converted into a huge brain. We shall be able to communicate with one another instantly, irrespective of distance." He didn't specify how it would happen, but he could clearly see what was coming from the 1920s. The Earth being converted into a huge brain is the perfect analogy for the internet. Ferdinand Foch was a French general who served as the Supreme Allied Commander during World War I. At the end of World War I, the guns fell silent on the 11th of November 1918. He was one of the Allies negotiating with the Germans as the terms of peace, the Treaty of Versailles, were being hammered out. Foch fought hard during the subsequent negotiations for tough peace terms against Germany. He wanted to make it impossible for them ever again to pose a threat to France, Europe, and the wider world. He was unhappy with the final document though. He thought the peace treaty with Germany was too lenient on them. At the signing of it, he was quoted as saying, by Winston Churchill no less, "This is not peace, it's an armistice." For 20 years. The Treaty of Versailles was signed on the 28th of June, 1919. On the 1st of September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and the starting pistol of World War II was fired. Foch's prediction of a further war was correct to within 3 months. An entire video could be dedicated to the predictions of science fiction writer and famous futurist Arthur C. Clarke. One such prediction was that by the year 2001, humanity could get their news and information from a large tablet device with a screen. He called it the newspad, and a depiction of it was included in the 1968 Stanley Kubrick film 2001: A Space Odyssey. In Arthur C. Clarke's screenplay, his description of the newspad went like this. He would plug in his foolscap-sized newspad into the ship's information circuit and scan the latest reports from Earth. Switching to the display unit's short-term memory, he would hold the front page while he quickly searched the headlines and noted the items that interested him. The postage stamp-sized rectangle would expand until it neatly filled the screen and he could read it with comfort. When he had finished, he would flash back to the complete page and select a new subject for detailed examination. Arthur C. Clarke actually saw the iPhone 1 year before his death, but sadly he died 2 years before the introduction of the iPad. Please allow me just 15 seconds to plug this channel. Very Nearly Interesting is a brand new channel, and I need all the help I can get. Please hit that like button if you've enjoyed this video. That's how YouTube knows you like it, and they'll show it to more people. And please consider subscribing. That way, we might see you again. As promised, I'm now going to reprise my recent video depicting predictions from 1899 for the year 2000. This video proves that predicting the future is not that easy. In 1899, as the world was awaiting the arrival of the 20th century, a group of French artists were asked to imagine what life would be like 100 years into the future, in the year 2000. They accepted the challenge and they took it seriously. After all, they were told that their work would be displayed at the Paris World Exhibition in 1900. They talked to scientists, businessmen and thinkers of the day to compile a list of innovations that could possibly be in use by the year 2000. The vast majority of the images that I'm about to show you were made in 1899. Some of their predictions are laughable, some are almost right, and some are surprisingly accurate, and some are ahead of our time now. Never mind 2000. These images would go on to be used as cigar box inserts, and then for 70 years they were completely forgotten. Until the 1980s, when Isaac Asimov acquired a set of them and published them in a 1986 book entitled Future Days, a 19th century vision of the year 2000. The images that I'm about to show you show just how far humanity has come. Things that are normal and commonplace for us today couldn't even have been imagined in 1899, but they had a really good shot at it, and in some instances they almost got it right. Please sit back and enjoy L'an 2000, literally in the year 2000. This is how they envisioned sea travel, underwater and powered by whales. Isambard Kingdom Brunel had already solved iron-hulled ships, powered by steam at this point. This is a poor start for their future predictions. Maybe the previous picture was a pleasure cruise underwater. It looks like everyone has hopped off the whale-powered sub for a game of underwater croquet. This is entitled Torpedo Plane. 4 years before the Wright brothers had developed powered, controlled, heavier-than-air flight, we were already predicting that war would be fought in the air. Sadly, they got this one right. This one is entitled Battle Cars, but they've correctly predicted the armoured battle tank. They're along the right lines here. We do have a lot of labour-saving gadgets these days, but having all of your beauty needs met at the flick of a switch is still some way off. Oh dear, it looks like the croquet game has been interrupted by a giant octopus. They seem to think that we'll be spending a lot of our time underwater at the turn of the millennium. At first glance, this looks crazy. The teacher is feeding the machine with books, and the knowledge is being fed into their brains electronically. On the same day as I'm writing this script, Elon Musk's Neuralink has just received FDA approval for human trials of his brain interface. Elon predicts that in years to come, we'll have AI and the internet in our brains via a neural lace. This is scarily accurate and still some way off, but it will come. This is entitled A House Rolling Through the Countryside. Well, we did have RVs in 2000, so it's partially correct. We don't sit on balconies and roof terraces whilst on the move, though. They predicted sound without the need for someone to be there playing instruments. It looks like the conductor is flicking a switch and machines are playing the instruments. We're underwater again. And this time, it's a day out at the races. This gentleman is receiving his voicemails in the morning. They're right about voicemail, but wrong about the delivery method. His manservant seems to be bringing him a gadget, which will be played on his desk-bound audio device. I'm going to give this one partial credit. The late Victorians imagined us spending a lot of time in the air. They envisioned law enforcement with high-speed chases on powered bikes. We don't have the inbuilt riot shield, so again, partial credit. They predicted advancements in how microscopes would change our view of the world. They predicted that we'd all have means of personal flight. These thieves are using their ability to fly for nefarious purposes, robbing nests perched high on rocks. They thought that you could go into a clothes shop and have your clothes made on the spot, just for you. This one is entitled Intensive Breeding. The eggs are fed in at the top and chicks are delivered via a chute. A Again, this is a prediction of aerial military capabilities. He's a solo advance party observing the enemy from the air. This is how they saw the future kitchen. They're right about the mod cons and the labour-saving devices, but this one looks more like a lab. If we're all going to be flying, then you're going to need the aviation police. Here we have a routine traffic stop. Fishing for seagulls whilst underwater. Maybe they're predicting climate change and the rising of the seas. I'm giving this a partial credit. Farms are now industrialised with incredibly efficient machinery. This farmer is managing his crops with just a flick of a switch. Maybe in 20 years, with the development of AI and robotics, this image will be even more accurate. This guy is printing a house. Incorrect for the year 2000, but spot on for 2023. The architect is pressing a button and the house gets printed. Technology that is available today. They predicted electric trains. No more back-breaking work for this housemaid? No, with just a tug on this brass bar, all of the cleaning is taken care of with this device. Again, they were way off the mark for 2000, but in 2023 we do have robot vacuum cleaners, so partial credit. We're back underwater and we've clearly found a way to make seahorses so big that we can actually ride them. This guy is dictating his letters. His speech has been converted to text and then printed out on a printer in his office. Again, they were wrong for the year 2000, but spot on for 2023. Speech-to-text technology developed by the likes of Google and Apple has made this scene a reality. They're having a video call. None of these predictions suggest internet communications or that iPads would be a thing. They just knew that this sort of thing would happen someday, and they were absolutely right. This modern house is warm and cosy because that's radium in the fireplace. Mercifully, this prediction did not come to pass. They thought that all of your barbering needs could be met with the flick of a switch and with a terrifying gadget wielding a blade. Again, mercifully, this didn't happen. Electric rollerblades. I'm putting this in the "why don't we have them by now" category. This guy is listening to his newspaper. They envisioned a time where you didn't need to read the news. No, you could just sit back and have the news read to you. They got the delivery method wrong, but other than that, they were, of course, spot on. They predicted huge advancements in astronomy, with huge telescopes of ever-increasing size. I'm giving this an A+. Mid-air lawn tennis, sadly, never seemed to take off. This is how air travel was envisioned. The boat, they reckoned, could be made lighter than air. It's incredible to think that just 4 years after this was painted, we had invented the first aeroplane. This one dates from 1910. It clearly depicts the Wright Flyer, invented in 1903. They predicted that you'd be able to rescue people at sea from air. We wouldn't do it in aeroplanes, but they were, of course, spot on. They thought getting the post to people in rural communities would be much better from the air. The aviation police again. They're making a mid-air arrest. This prediction must have seemed so obvious in 1899. Clearly, hunting would be easier from the air. They thought everyone would be flying in the year 2000, and that includes the fire service. But is this really so crazy? Why couldn't we now give a fireman a jetpack and a long hose for those really tall buildings? I'm putting this in the category of, it's a good idea, so why don't we do it? They were clearly misinformed about how slowly an aeroplane could travel. This pilot is just swinging past his local cafe for a much-needed glass of claret. They knew aeroplanes would be a thing in 2000, and this is how they envisioned an airport. They thought that there would be an aero cab station on virtually every street. And finally, fighting on the land, sea and air. Sadly, they were absolutely correct. I'm sure if you and I were to predict the year 2123, we'd be way off the mark. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit that like button. That way YouTube will show it to more people. And please consider subscribing. That way we might see you again. And please have a look at some of the other videos on the channel. There's lots of interesting things on there. Well, very nearly interesting.